Okay, my friends, we are here in Google Sheets, and I am getting ready to show you how to build a process inside of Google Sheets, something that can house that beautiful process that you've just developed. So on this very first tab, you'll see this is the template. This is the blank file that you will use to build your own process. But I am actually going to show you the example file, and we're just going to walk through this so you can get a sense of how this might be built for an example. And I actually went and pulled up something that we use. Now, you may know at the time our podcast is actually on a hiatus. We're taking a little break, but we built this process to manage how we ran our podcast. And this is exactly what I used inside of my business, so you can get a sense of what it looked like for me, what it looked like for team members, etc. So I'm just going to walk you through this to give you some of the layout, some of the logic, and how all this kind of comes together. So when we're producing the podcast, step number one is pre-planning that podcast calendar. And I like to do that on a rolling 2-month window because I needed to work pretty far out to make sure we had enough time to batch all of the episodes and get them in. So for me, I need about 30 minutes to sit down and pre-plan that calendar. And I do that on the first of the month. So you'll see under how long, 30 minutes. When it's due, first of the month. Who's responsible? Well, that's me. Then moving to the next thing, contacting interviews to schedule recording dates. So once I've kind of pre-planned what the calendar looks like, I would reach out to people that I want to interview and schedule dates to record with them. And let's say it's, to get about a rolling month's worth of stuff done, so say 4 episodes or so, it would take me about 30 minutes to send out those emails. I would also try to do that all on the first of the month so I could batch it and get it rolling. Now, once I've done that, the next thing I need to do is ask interviewees to complete the guest form, send their bio, and pictures. And that only takes about 5 minutes for me to email that over to a guest. And I honestly, I never put anything less than 5 minutes because I feel like putting 1 minute seems obscene, but like maybe it takes me a minute to email them, but you get the point. And that's something I would do on just a weekly basis. So 5 minutes per guest weekly. And moving just down the line here, I would read the guest input form, research the guest, prep the outline, and that would take about 30 minutes per guest. I would do that weekly, and that for me is gearing up towards recording an interview. And I would record typically on Fridays, 1 episode per week. So you can see how I was working towards that. And you'll just see as I progress through here, I've just noted like, okay, this is the next thing in the process. Confirm the interview, record the podcast, record the intro and the outro. Then I'm taking all the files that I have and sending them to the editor. And this is where you see that finally it's not my responsibility. Editing the show is someone else's. That's our podcast editor. And when the files come back from the editor, it now kicks into work for our content coordinator. And what she does is then listens to the edited episode. She writes the show notes for the episode and includes links with it. And then she goes into Canva and creates the actual images that we would use, the graphics that would be put on not only Buzzsprout, which is where we host the episodes, but also what we'd use on social media. Then she's going to schedule the episode in Buzzsprout, schedule social media post, and then when the episode goes live, specifically on the day the podcast airs, she's going to email out a thank you to the guest with a link to the podcast and then copy that to me. So that's it. Now, that is taking what you've developed. So when you go to do this, you'll of course come to the template and you're just going to work it step by step. So what's the process you're building? You type that here and then you'll come down into the task and just identify it. Okay, step number 1. What's that first thing you wrote on the written process? What do? How long does it take? When is it due? And who's responsible. Now, the one new piece of information that we've added in this file that we didn't have before is when is it due? And sometimes that's going to be a date. So let me give you that example. In this file, on the first of the month, that is a task that I have. Pre-planned podcast calendar and contact interviews. I do that on the first of the month. Now, the rest of these things recur on a little bit of a different window, weekly, right? So for you, just consider when is it due? Some of them may have a very firm date, and some of them may just be more windows of time. And that's useful because when you take this later and you start to look at it and putting it into your calendar, you'll have a very clear picture of what needs to live where. And then, of course, who's responsible, as we discussed before. It might be you right now, but you may have your eyes on giving that task to someone else down the line, and that's awesome. You can also flag that here so that you kind of know, yeah, okay, this is something I'd like to get rid of at some point in time. Now, what I will say is if this is the option you choose to implement, meaning you build your process in Google Sheets, what you're going to want to do are then build reminders into your calendar, assuming that you're using like Google Calendar. You're going to want to take each one of these things and just go populate them in the calendar so that it hits that reminder. So let's just give this first example. So pre-plan podcast calendar for the rolling 2-month window, and you've identified it happens on the first of the month. So what I would do is I would copy this. And here, let's just go pop into my calendar. And let's just scroll over to March. So we've said this would happen on the 1st. And what I would do is populate this, let's say you want to do it in the morning. Maybe that's first thing. You just come in here, put that here, and come down here to more options. And then, of course, what we'll do is make it repeat. So it's not an all-day task, maybe, and like we've identified, it only takes 30 minutes. 8 to 8:30, and it's going to repeat monthly on the first Friday, or we could also do custom and get it to the first of the month. But let's just say monthly on the first Friday for the sake of saving time. Hit save. And then we've now got this in our calendar as an actual to-do, and you might color code it or whatever the case may be, but something that's actually mapped to your calendar. You follow me? So, where are we? There we go. So this is going to be the important thing is if we want this to live in a way that's truly actionable, we need to put it in your calendar and make sure that you're going to go do it. So you're going to want to take each one of these things and populate them. Now, one of the things you may consider, if you have a bunch of tasks that are like weekly, like these are, aside from say recording, so we have some that's like some prep work here, those might get rolled up into like a recurring podcast work block that you then stick in your calendar. So maybe we say like, okay, these repeat weekly. It's reaching out to guests, confirming interview, prepping for a show. So maybe I say, well, on Mondays would really be the day for me to just tackle all those tasks. So in that case, I could put it in my calendar, but I might also come over here and say weekly and put Monday. And then I would know that those are on Mondays. And like I mentioned earlier, when we record episodes, I actually do those on Friday. So there's a way for me to make this more meaningful and more actionable if I can come over here and tweak that a little bit, right? So now I just need a little work block for these things to live in my calendar on Monday. So what I would do, let's just come here. Monday the 25th, I would say, all right, well, I want to work on the podcast in the afternoon. So maybe I come down here to 4 o'clock and I put podcast work block. And again, we're going to do the same thing. So we want to make sure we get recurrence. So we would say does repeat weekly on Monday. Save. You got it? So now we have podcast work block. And then let's say I know I'm recording the podcast on Friday. And of course that might flex a little depending on, in this case, when the guest is available. But generally speaking, when I used to do it, they would happen sometime between like 10 and 2. So I may just go ahead and put that in here. Podcast recording work block. And I can put this from 10 until 2 p.m. Save it. Just come back in here. And then I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. Repeats weekly on Friday. So now this is in the calendar every single week. So as I'm building out my calendar, taking appointments, doing other things, I can now see where I've got some stuff I don't want to book over because this stuff is important to me. I need to make sure I've carved out the time for that. You follow? Okay. So you're going to continue that process for every single thing that you map out here into your calendar to make sure you've created the time and that it is a recurring window of time in your own calendar. And of course, if you're using some other calendar, do it in some other calendar. That's totally okay. But of course, I'm just showing you this example inside the Google suite of stuff. Okay. If you have any questions on this particular version of building your process, reach out, let me know. And I will meet you in the next video where I'm going to show you this process in Asana. And I will tell you it's pretty doggone cool. So if you're looking to make this a little bit simpler and to live in one place, meet me over there. See you in that video.